So here in Germany, the SPD, one of the parties in the governing coalition, wants to make changes to the regulations surrounding the best before date on food products in order to avoid food being wasted. But what about consumer protection? Don't expiry dates exist for a reason? Does the government want us all to eat rotten food? Well, no, that is not what they're proposing. And they're not even talking about expiry dates. That's a different matter. So let's briefly discuss this. And while I will be talking about German and EU law specifically, the same basic principle actually applies in other countries as well. First of all, in a technical sense, expiry dates are only found on medicines. When talking about foods, there are two ways of labeling them depending on what kind of food it actually is. Best before and use by. They're worded differently and they have different meanings and different regulations. Not all food has to be labelled though. Fresh, unprocessed and unpackaged food like meat straight from the butchers or fruit, but that doesn't need to have any date on it at all. You buy it fresh and you consume it as soon as you can. Packaged foods, on the other hand, that's a different matter. The use-by date is found on foods that can very quickly spoil and become dangerous to consume. These are products like unpasteurized milk, raw meat, and raw fish. Things that can make you quite ill if you leave them just a bit too long. In Germany, this is indicated with the words zu verbrauchen bis. And for those of you in North America, remember that in Europe, dates are given in day, month, year format. There can be extra details. In the example I just showed you, the date assumes that you've left the package unopened and refrigerated to below 2 degrees Celsius. Of course, any date is going to become immediately irrelevant the moment you open the packaging or let it warm up, in which case you should consume the product immediately. Once this date has passed, stores can no longer legally continue to sell the product. And if you have anything at home that has passed its use-by date, you should definitely not eat it. You probably won't end up in hospital, but there's no point in taking that risk. Other packaged foods, by contrast, have a best before date, which is indicated by the phrase mindestens haltbar bis. And this is quite a different matter because you can usually consume the product long after that date has passed. Although it is a legal requirement to have that date, all it really means is that the manufacturer is prepared to guarantee that the product will be in perfect condition at least up until that date. After that date, it may be that it doesn't taste or look nice, but it will most certainly become inedible or undrinkable long before it becomes dangerous. It might, for example, become stale or wrinkly or limp. Obviously, if it goes a funny color or you see mold on it, you should throw it away, but otherwise, it's safe. For example, sterilized milk has a best before date. After that date, it might start to go sour or lumpy, but you could still drink it, certainly if you've left it unopened or in the fridge. It'll probably taste horrible, but it won't kill you. Similarly, have you ever wondered why honey has a best before date? Well, if you leave it long enough, the sugar in it will start to crystallize. It's still perfectly good. Honey is a preservative. It lasts thousands of years. It just won't spread so easily. Shops can continue to sell these products past their best before dates, so long as they've just been quickly checked to make sure that they are still fit to eat. But most don't, because customers simply won't buy them. And this is the problem that the SPD says leads to food waste. The Federal Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Regional Identity estimates that in Germany around 10.8 million tons of food are thrown away every year, although this does include inedible components like bones and peelings. Of that, around 58% comes from private homes, meaning that on average, about 75 kilograms of food per person goes to waste every year. A lot of that is generated by people throwing away perfectly good food because they assume that a best before date is an expiry date, which it isn't. Exactly what proportion of food waste is down to that is difficult to ascertain, but one study by a market research company does offer some insight. It suggests that around 40% of food waste from private households is avoidable, meaning food that's thrown away when it's still good to eat. About 20% of households say that they throw away food simply because it's past its best before date. Most, though, say that they throw away food because it has in fact gone bad, or because they've prepared more than they can eat. Which means that while the best before misunderstanding is certainly a very significant factor here, by far the bigger problem is people simply buying way more than they actually need. The SPD would like to exempt very long-lasting products from the requirement to have a best before date. Now, some products already are exempt, things like salt, sugar, certain alcoholic drinks. The proposal is to add to that list things like rice, dried pasta, tea, stuff that would keep for years, even decades, without any loss of quality. And the party also wants to change the way this labelling is worded in order to avoid this misunderstanding. Consumers, they say, should be informed, not unsettled. Now, personally, I would have thought that Best Before does that perfectly well, but what do I know? The SPD does have other proposals, such as decriminalizing dumpster diving, which, yes, in Germany is currently illegal. But on changes to the best before date, there's actually a very good reason why it's probably a bit pointless to be dealing with that on a national level. This would actually require some changes to EU regulations. No matter how badly the Bundestag wants this to happen, it doesn't have the power to do anything much. But on that front, there is some good news. The EU is already discussing this issue, so the necessary changes might come anyway. So really, especially given that the German government is already running an awareness campaign, there really wasn't much point in the SPD bringing the subject up at all. So normally I'd have some bloopers for you at this point, but I don't have any this time. So subscribe, please.